The Justice Department out just moments ago as we were coming on air with a new response to the judge who's demanding more information about the administration invoking the Alien Enemies Act. Remember, that was almost a week ago when it deported migrants to El Salvador. And this judge wants to know whether the administration ignored a court order when they did it. Here's also some of that video we've seen. There's a hearing scheduled in this case this afternoon, so we hope to get more information then. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has been on top of this story at every turn. Also with us is Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. Julia, what's the DOJ saying in this new filing, and then what can we expect later today at that hearing?
That's right. So this is coming ahead of that hearing. You know, Judge Boasberg all week has been pushing the government for more answers. Not about whether or not his decision should change. He still has that stay in place on the Alien Enemies Act, but whether or not they violated his Saturday night order by continuing to put those immigrants in that prison in El Salvador. Right now, what we're learning in this filing from the Justice Department is that they're claiming that there are cabinet-level discussions over invoking the State Secret Act, instead saying that they can't answer all of Judge Boasberg's questions as to whether or not they violated the order and give him details like the timing of when the planes took off and when they landed and when they were in the air and exactly who was on them and when exactly this act was first invoked. Instead, they are having cabinet-level discussions to see if they're going to invoke the State Secrets Act, which is even a higher level than classification of documents, what would even possibly keep Judge Boasberg from getting these answers himself. He's already said he's willing to do this in camera, meaning behind closed doors in his chamber, and only to him. But at this point, they're saying that may even be too far.
The judge has been taking issue with the layers that seem to be preventing him from getting answers. Again, it's been almost a week here. He wrote just last night as he was really urging the government to come back with something more. He called what they had already given him woefully insufficient. And he wrote, the government cannot proffer a regional ICE official to attest to cabinet-level discussions of the state secrets privilege. Again, just moments ago, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche submitted this declaration, say he can attest to the accuracy of the statements based on personal knowledge. So, Joyce, how do you see this?
Well, this is so intricate procedurally because, as Julia says, this is not about the substance of the case. This is about whether the government violated the temporary restraining order that Judge Boasberg put in place. He's trying to get facts that will allow him to make that determination. And the government is stonewalling, which is a little bit difficult to understand since so much of this is clearly not a matter of state secrets. For instance, the fact that Trump invoked the Alien Act, or the fact that these planes took off and landed, which the government itself paraded around on social media. So although normally when state secrets are involved, courts don't inquire too deeply beyond the fact of the invocation, here it's entirely appropriate. And what this attestation from the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, does is it's minimal compliance with the court's order. Todd Blanche has simply said, I'm aware and I've been involved in these conversations at the cabinet level. Look, I think it's appropriate for the cabinet to take its time to determine whether or not to invoke state secrets, which is a common law doctrine that prevents courts from inquiring into military secrets that could damage our national security. On the other hand, the government is flirting with violating the judge's order, and he has plenty of possibilities for contempt proceedings against the government if he finally loses his patience with them.
So tell us more about that, because we've seen Judge Boasberg repeatedly ask for more information and not get it. Realistically, what more can he do or other judges do in a case like this?
Right. So I guess the most strident possibility here, Anna, would be to go after the government for some form of criminal contempt. And although we might normally say, well, that can't happen since the Justice Department is the prosecution, there's actually a provision in the federal rules of criminal procedure that lets the judge appoint a private prosecutor if the government isn't willing, which they almost certainly would not be willing in this situation. There's some precedent for that to happen. I've been involved in a matter in my district many years ago during the Bush administration where a judge actually did that and permitted a prosecution for contempt to move forward, in that case against a private party, not the government. But there's good indication from courts in the District of Columbia that you can take sanctions against the government, including jailing government officials or requiring them to pay damages personally if a contempt prosecution is successful.
Julia, there's still this big question about whether the people who were deported were even who the government says they were. They've been called gang members and terrorists. You've been talking to some of their families. What more have you learned?
That's right. We've been talking to families. We've had 3 and then others who we've spoken to since Tuesday who have said that, look, their people, their loved ones, some of them brothers, some of them sons, some of them husbands, are not members of this gang and have no criminal activity. And in fact, we saw that same field office ICE director that we heard from originally in this filing put out another attestation. He was attesting earlier in the week that many of these people don't have criminal histories. Yes, that's correct. But he said it's only because they haven't been in the country long enough to commit a crime. And Anna, what they're trying to say is that because these people have an affiliation with the Tren de Aragua gang, they believe they could commit a crime. But that affiliation, of course, we haven't seen that be proven in a court of law. Oftentimes they will use a tattoo to try to connect someone, but it's not the same way that you would typically do it. But that's what the Alien Enemies Act does. It allows a president to use sweeping wartime powers in order to summarily deport usually a nationality in a time of war. In this case, they're using it to go after this specific gang, regardless of how tight that affiliation really is.
Julia Ainsley and Joyce Vance, ladies, thank you so much for walking us through all of these steps. And joining us now is Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward and co-counsel in that joint lawsuit with the ACLU against the Trump administration.